Welcome to the MarTech.org podcast.
This episode was recorded live during the Spring 2024 MarTech Conference. Enjoy.
Welcome, everybody, to the talk today. It's on customer identity without third-party cookies. This is a very relevant topic, I think, to any of us in the MarTech, ad tech space, both on the buy side and the sell side. I am Ken Zachmann. I've worked in, it's funny to call it big data. I think it's more business intelligence now for the past 20 plus years. The last 6 years of my career arc has been focused in my own consulting, strictly focused around business intelligence, specifically around identity. And so helping companies either source data to build identity graphs, to use identity in a way that's going to help them prepare for third-party deprecation and get them into a position where they're going to be in good shape with their first-party data and just anything around identity. So I've been steeped in this space for quite a while, and I'm here with Ange from IAB, and I'll let her introduce herself, and then we can kind of kick off the conversation.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Angelina Eng. I'm VP of Measurement, Addressability and Data Center. I've been in this industry for about 30 years, predominantly on the agency side. Have done several different stunts in different roles: media planner, buyer, account management, ad operations, and analytics prior to joining IAB. And now I, as part of the Media Measurement Addressability Data Center, I focus on all things data collection, data activation, data transformation, and all the pipes and signals that enable companies to make decisions and optimize their campaigns.
That's awesome. That's covered a lot. Yeah. I think I have like 20 years in the industry too, but mine's mostly been around data and monetizing data and online data. I was with Datalogix, Oracle, V12. So, but past years just focused on an identity. But for this conversation, I think we want to make the most out of it for the group who's listening in. So I think there's some interesting topics we're going to cover, and I wanted to kick it off because Ange just did a recent study on the state of data in 2024, and I'd love to hear her thoughts on what that study revealed. What are some of the insights, and really what are some of the key takeaways for the marketers that are on this call?
Yeah, so thanks. So we just released our 7th report. We do it every year around this time. Typically announce it at ALM, but we figured that we needed some time after Google deprecated the first-party cookie. We basically interviewed and surveyed 500 data leaders and ad executives, predominantly on the agency, publisher, and brand side. So a pretty robust study. And the purpose of the study was to understand what are some of the impacts that privacy legislation, loss of data signals, the deprecation of third-party cookies are having on our industry. And we dove into things around operations, logistics, infrastructure, talent, and the biggest question is impact on financials. So it was quite interesting over the last couple of years. And I know some of you on this call, we've had conversations about how the industry hasn't been ready for the deprecation of cookies for the last 3-4 years since Google announced it back in January 2020. And it appears that a lot of companies are now taking steps to future-proof themselves. And I thought that was one of the most interesting aspects of it, because when we asked questions about their readiness, a lot of them said that, yeah, they were ready. They were doubling down on first-party data. But when we drilled down even further, a lot of them didn't understand Privacy Sandbox. They were still confused over what topics versus pledge was versus flock. So it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And then I think for me, my message and study really revealed that even though companies are taking steps, everything's changing. The way they plan, what they're investing in. Most of them are looking to increase their first party data. So, identity is a big factor. But when it comes to unknown audiences, they're still experimenting and looking for talent, for people who are privacy focused or more privacy conscious, is really difficult right now. And that's causing a lot of disruption internally and externally. A lot of companies still don't know what to do, but they're trying to take steps.
Yeah. Andrew, I have a question around just on that note, as far as working with brands that I work with. How many brands that were involved in that study, because 500 is a lot to target, have they all signed up with consent management platforms? Are they able to remove and opt out different users who state by state? Do they have that kind of capability in place, or are they trying to do it in-house? Are they signing up with all the consent management platforms to handle that? Because building a really strong first party file and being able to manage that from a privacy standpoint is no easy task for a lot of brands.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, the not only, I mean, a lot of them are still trying to figure it out and navigate, but yeah, we're seeing increases in CDPs, CMPs, data clean rooms. However, I think California already said that, hey, they have their eyes on not only first party data, but data clean rooms. And so that might be an area of focus that they start investigating and auditing to see if there's anything there for them to possibly restrict or provide some guidance on. That'll be interesting to see. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of investment in there, both in software, products and services, and like I said, talent. And we're seeing that across brands. The smaller to the mid tail to the long tail, they're struggling the most, both on the not only brands, but publishers and agencies who don't have the financial means to invest in all this stuff. They're leaning more towards the walled gardens. And so they're hoping that the walled gardens is a safer place for them to invest in. So
I've seen the same trend, and I've seen a lot of companies, particularly in that mid-tier space, saying, we're gonna do direct integrations. We already have them set up in the walled gardens. Let's do our onboarding activation there and hope for the best. But that we'll get into it later as far as measurement, attribution, over attribution, things like that cause some confusion, could be down the road for these marketers. One more point I'm curious about that I've been talking to brands about heavily and trying to do in the trainings I do and the work I do is, the first party, file and getting that in order is so critical and has been critical to prepare for these changes. Is there much talk about how companies or brands are, working on what's, nomenclature zero party data, where they're trying to do, more insights and information about, getting information from different customers to find out how they want to be targeted, what they're interested in. And I work with customers or brands on that, and there's a mixed bag as far as people who are really on it and into it, or people who are like, wait, there's another party of data that I have to think about. So I'm just wondering about what your thoughts on that, and that anything was revealed in the study as far as how in depth they're getting with their first party file.
So a lot of companies, I don't have the actual report in front of me right now, but they talked about still being able to collect first party data, some interest-based additional or interest topics, looking at some of their contextual behavior and appending that to their first party data. So leveraging first party cookies, and if they're logged in and registered, trying to collect that. However, there is a level of caution of being able to democratize that data. But a lot, that's where the agencies come into. Like, there's several agencies, one that I've worked in, right? That really touts that they have a huge first party or a huge people-based database that they can help clients democratize a lot of that information or supplement a lot of the either shopping habits, purchasing behavior, or household data and all of that stuff. In addition to owning cats, have a car,
Yeah, it's
likes
all,
to read newspapers.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm going to go to a question in the chat here. It looks like we've got, back to the walled garden question. Within walled gardens, particularly in Gary's question about Facebook and LinkedIn, without third-party cookies in place, do the walled gardens, let's just say Meta and LinkedIn in this case, do they have, tools to do remarketing and audiences without cookies? And I know that Meta does. I'm not quite sure about LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn does to a degree, but I know they've all built internal systems to help with retargeting, remarketing inside the walls of the walled garden. But Ange, I don't know if anything came out of your study or any conversations you've had with brands about and within the walled gardens, beyond even Meta and LinkedIn, looking at Pinterest, I guess that's already walled garden, but AWS, things like that. Are they, how are they approaching, one of the most important tools that we've used in the past in sense of remarketing and retargeting?
Yeah, so here at IB, we don't get down to specific platforms. We need to be kind of agnostic. So we look at social media as a category or walled gardens as a general category. And what we're hearing, Privacy Sandbox has fledged, or PAPI, I should say, protected audiences, where you can add people into your interest groups, which is a form of remarketing in the Chrome's perspective. There is the ability to currently still retarget off of first-party cookies. So if you're in a walled garden and you are doing CRM onboarding, and you have consent from consumers, you're going to still be able to do that. We are seeing a huge investment, or I wouldn't say huge, but a significant shift towards what we call retail media networks. However, I think retail media networks are really evolving to beyond just retailers. You've got travel, you have CPG that can leverage their first party data and start monetizing it. So it's really I'll call it commerce marketplace, or a commerce network that we're seeing. I think Terry Kawaja kind of coined that in a recent event that I just held last week called the Measurement Leadership Summit. So he called it the commerce network instead of retail media network.
I like that, commerce network. Yeah, retail media is it's surprising how, I won't say fast, but how fast they got traction, and looking across, whether it be Target, AWS, all the different retail media networks out there, and the reach they have. What I found working with mid-tier brands is there's a steep cost and a lot of not difficulty, but difficulty to kind of work with the retail media networks, even though they're becoming quite powerful. They've got so much intelligence on customers. I hope that becomes more democratized as kind of we grow into this next phase. But I see these commerce networks, I guess we'll call them now, becoming even more important as we look into when the end of 2024 and into 2025 and beyond. Like they've really taken root. So
yeah, and my prediction, at least when it comes to Facebook, is very similar to how TikTok has approached it, the TikTok store, right? Yeah. So everything in terms of transactions will reside within their platform. And so if they go about doing that, and I think Facebook has Facebook Marketplace capabilities in their integration with Shopify and such, they'll be able to connect some of that shopping behavior or purchase behavior back to who they targeted. But the question is the level of granularity that they're going to be able to provide. And so this is where I think regulations are going to limit their capabilities of being able to provide any raw event level data that could potentially enable any company to fingerprint or stitch audience data.
Yeah, agreed 100% there. And I think, one other, let me see, one more question we've got in here. Do you think marketing teams will implement server-side tag managing to track in the future, and what percentage of companies are doing this? As far as, I think marketing teams are doing this, but I see it happening a lot in the way that being, like Ange mentioned, outsourced to the CDPs or EDPs to manage the tags and manage that sort of server side, tracking on that side to do personalization, to do additional targeting. There's only the more enterprise level brands that I see are setting their own tags, and a lot of that is, it's a little more complex. And so, Ange, do you see a buy build partner when it comes to tagging publisher sites or trying to work within a publisher network that you've focus on, or tagging different parts of your site to capture information about the user?
Oh, you're bringing me back to my ad ops days.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna take you way back to your
Take me way back. Well, I'm up in the air about the future of tagging.
same.
It's, I mean, what was it last year? It wasn't Best Buy, but it was someone else. It was Better Health.
Yeah.
Another health site that potentially adds servers or the ability to leverage any sort of data. And the FTC, it just kind of clarified that almost all behavioral data or any data coming through the data signals could be considered sensitive or contextual.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting set of times where I think there will be still tagging. I just think that the signals that we're able to collect or activate against us, activate, is going to be hard. It's more going to be a means of delivering ads, and I'm not quite sure what it means for the measurement side.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with you on exactly that. That's a great segue into a question I've gotten recently from a P&E firm that was looking in the industry in general, as far as, when we look at, Chrome cookie deprecation coming up quick and fast. Once Chrome, let's say, makes the switch, we've already had 1% turned off. I don't know if that's statistically relevant to really get a good read. But
it's still like 350 million people.
It's still, it's still a lot.
I mean, it's 1% of the.
I know it's still a ton. Yeah,
it's still a lot of cookies.
But I'm wondering, and I get this question, and would love your thoughts on it too, as far as when the switch happens and the signals loss kind of goes into place from cookies through Chrome, in the majority of search traffic and browser traffic goes through Chrome. What do you think? And maybe this is a two-layered question. What do you think that reach rate is going to be, or to say match rate, using either independent identifiers like UID, ramp ID, things like that, or some ID5, some stitching together of IDs? Do you think it'll be like, a 40% loss in signal out of the gates? Do you think it'll be more incremental? Depend on vertical, depend on,
So people aren't going to like my answer.
That's what I was wondering about, because the IAB always has more data than anybody else.
Well, I don't have any. It's more of an opinion, right? I look at Apple's ATT prompt as a benchmark, and so if you have 20% of people that have opted into quote unquote personalized ads. Actually, I want to debate on that too, but I'll get to that later.
Okay, that number.
20%, 20 to 30% have opted in to personalized ads. That's what I think is going to happen, right? Right now, a lot of publishers, except for the ones that have, except for the streaming partners and maybe major subscription magazines or newspapers, most publishers only have about 20% of their user base that have opted in, that are registered, that have opted into a newsletter of some sort. So that means that 80% of their audience is a no already.
Yeah.
How do you incentivize that 80%? Now let's take that 20% And of that 20%, right now, match rates are anywhere between 50 to 70%, right?
Exactly. Yep.
What percentage of those people are going to opt in to allow for their data beyond personalized content to be used for advertising and for measurement? I'm going to assume another 20%. So it's going to be 20% of 20%. That's where I think it's going to be.
So I agree with you there, and it's a little painful to hear those numbers aloud, because you're right. If we follow like ATT and iOS and the changes there, that's what we're seeing with with those changes. And so I think it's going to be the same as we look towards what's going to happen in this year and in the next year. We do have another question in the chat about, in a post third party cookie world, and I think I get this question, I'm sure you do all the time. It's almost like the Lord of the Rings. Which ID should I pick? Which one's going to rule the roost? Which one's going to be the go-to? And my answer is, right away, I don't think there's going to be one single ID, and we're talking independent ID, not walled garden IDs, that's going to, solve for third-party cookies. I think it's going to be a combination of companies that are going to be using companies like LiveRamp, UID, UID5. I think there's going to be a handful of companies that have really strong reach, have been building this infrastructure for the better part of a decade. I think there'll be a combination of companies that brands will work with to try to fill that gap within the independent side. This isn't looking at direct integrations as you're sending data directly to, let's say, Meta or to the big social or to any of the walled gardens. But it begs an even larger question as far as the accuracy, because what I'm hearing from a lot of the brands who are working directly with the walled gardens and with the major social platforms, Pinterest, Snap, they're using hem-based matching. And hems are not really a person; they're a proxy to a person, so it can get really hairy when it comes to measurement down the road, which I think might come home to roost in the latter part of the year. But I'll back up, and Ange, I would love your opinion on, what do you think about the post third party cookie IDs that are going to hopefully take, the place of what we have now and what we'll be relied on forever?
Well, I don't think there'll be a replacement of a cookie, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing going to be is going to replicate a cookie that is universally used.
Yeah.
And just like there will also be multiple currencies, I think you're absolutely right.
Currencies, you're right.
Right. So identity is a currency. Now, what's more apparent to me is that, I don't know if anyone read the IAB Tech Labs Fit Gap analysis. I'll put the link in shortly for that one. But they they came up with 44 use cases, from lookalike modeling to retargeting to bid auctions to identity of fraud and IVT, right? Flagging and all of that stuff, supporting VAST, etc. And out of the 44, I think only 8 was identified as supported. Now, we have received feedback from Google that they believe that some of our assessment was mislabeled or inaccurate. So we're going through a whole process right now, having them involved to discuss what that actually means. Some quite interesting conversations, but at least we're all talking and they're hearing. A lot of I think it was like 65 tech companies that came that helped to put together this document. And what's apparent to me is that data quality as we see it today is not going to be the same. And we can argue, is data quality high today?
True, yeah.
I would argue that it's not. But I think that we are moving to a probabilistic, inferred data modeling era. And so companies are going to have to decide on different solutions and different vendors that they feel confident that their models work for them. I think if you go, what's going to happen is you can take bunch of different data sets together. You know this, right? Take a bunch of different data sets together. You give it to one vendor, they're going to come up with a different result. You give it than company B, and so brands and advertisers are going to have to decide and test out different solutions to figure out where, which one's actually giving them the most confidence that and results that they're seeing on the back end.
100% agree with that. And I also think that there's going to be kind of a shift as well between, let's just say, the spectrum of enterprise brands, all the way down to mid and small, D2C brands, where before cookies were pretty ubiquitous, anybody could use them. We all had tools for that. And now if we're going to be looking at these third-party, let's say, independent identifiers to not replace, but to help supplement some of the loss, there's going to be a tech tax involved in that. And so that's going to have to be really, weighed in when they look at their overall, return on ad spend, their overall ROI, and how that's going to play into measurement. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to look at too, as far as, do these, we'll call them third-party identifiers to replace cookies, can the brands afford them and justify the spend based on whatever conversion tracking they're following and looking at that. So I think that's going to also be a factor for a lot of mid-tier brands.
Yeah, and it's not just the third-party cookies, right? It's the Apple devices, the privacy regulations. And what's interesting is publishers are, when it comes to privacy regulations, they're approaching a state-by-state compliance. So they're because they don't want to leave money off the table.
Yeah.
So if there's certain restrictions that I have to do for California, I'll do that. But California law doesn't really apply to Utah or Vermont right now. And so Vermont has a different definition of what they consider sensitive data or how data is being shared. So I'm going to focus on, what Utah or check off the boxes for what Utah restrictions are.
Yeah.
Brands and agencies, they like to do one thing, develop a process, one size fits all. So it'll be interesting to see what, how this works out.
And that's the crux of it all too. It's like, we have to wait almost until this happens to find out how it's all going to net out. Like we're all kind of, doing trial runs and practicing, but we won't really know until it's all done. And so that's going to be a kind of a fascinating study as far as that goes. I do want to circle back to the, we've already seen, let's call it the signal loss with iOS devices. And a question I get across the board is either big brands, private equity firms looking in the space, they're asking me, when this happened, and let's say, what was that number? It was like, Meta was losing roughly 10 to $13 billion a year in ad spend once the iOS devices were, quote unquote, opted out, or only 20% opted in. Where do you see, Ange, where marketers or brands were reallocating that budget? Because they were looking and saying, God, I can't reach iOS devices in the way that I could before. And
Well, they're not going to be able to reach Chrome devices either. So.
Yeah, so now we're getting like even deeper into it. And so, I saw during the early parts of this where, brands were saying, oh my gosh, I'm getting black box measurement from Meta based on whoever I'm targeting after the signal loss happened, but I need better measurement. I need to understand where my attribution is. And a lot of the shift I saw was moving to connected TV and to other platforms where there could be more, measurement and tracking and attribution involved. And I thought it was an interesting shift because I don't know about you, Ange, but I saw that, CTV was something that was promised for so long as like the end all be all. And not until the iOS changes really went into place did people actually say, okay, we're going to start doubling down on connected TV advertising and across Roku, Fire Stick, all the different platforms. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think, because this could be, a little bit of history. It could help us understand what may happen next year as far as where budgets will be reallocated and how market will be targeted.
So I have some really strong opinions on this. Okay. So everyone reacts really quickly, right? So I can't get measurement here. So I'm going to shift to something else that's going to give me measurement. And then if I lose measurement there, I'm going to go shift to something that has measurement.
What I saw,
so that's what's going to happen. Go to CTV, go to retail media networks, creator economy, social media, right? However, IP address is not immune to being regulated.
Oh, it will
And
be, I think.
and
Yeah.
it will be, right?
Yeah.
Data clean rooms will likely be regulated.
Yeah.
Identity solutions will likely be regulated. Like, so in my opinion, is like, if you're continuing to try to chase after deterministic data, then you're not planning for the long term.
Yeah. 100%.
And this is where I think AI modeling does well. I talked about, I've been in this industry for 30 years. Well, back in 1995, and Adam Smoller, I know you're here, right? Back in the day when double click days, right? Back in the days before there was floodlight tags, there was spotlight tags. Before there was spotlight tags, there were no tags, and we served ads just fine. There was a lot more sponsorships, branded entertainment. There was more. I think this is where brands really paid more attention to where their ads were being placed. And although, we did our best with back then we had 720 by 90s, 234 by 60s, 120 by 90s, before we actually had.
Yeah.
And so back then we did not have identity. We did not have, ad servers were not strongly adopted, at least for reporting conversions. I don't see, and you look over the years and you can account for inflation, sure, why not? But CPM rates have not really drastically changed.
Yeah.
I was paying 30 to 60, depending on how targeted I wanted to be. CPAs were, were within reasonable range as well. So how much have we actually become more efficient over the years? CPAs have not seen a significant drop. We haven't seen 200%.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Drop, right? So I do think that maybe going back to the future is the term of learning and doing old traditional media mix modeling, attribution modeling, the way we've done it with television, print, radio, out of home. We need to apply those past methodologies, if you will, or at least the thinking to digital. So look at it holistically, not look at it linear, right? From point A to point Z.
Yeah.
So, and I think this will allow for us to have improve and build back relationships between publishers and buyers. And that's not a bad thing.
No, it's a good, great thing. It's where we need to go back to,
Yeah.
because there was a lot more direct involvement between advertisers and publishers before there was. Let's just picture the Lumascape with all these logos sitting between the advertiser and the publisher. So I hope we get back to a place that is more direct in that sense. You brought up an interesting point about we should talk about the privacy sandbox and cohort level targeting, and a lot of companies are moving that direction. What do we? How do you think that's going to be regulated? How effective? I mean, if you look at Ad Exchanger on any given day, there is an article that says privacy sandbox is great. Next day, privacy sandbox misses the mark. I mean, it's all over the board as far as how privacy sandbox is either serving, helping, hurting, marketers. I think a lot of marketers I talk to are just kind of confused about, to what degree do I adopt the privacy sandbox and how do I use it? Google's I don't think, done a really fantastic job about getting the messaging out on how to, really partner up and anyways, I'll stop there, but love your thoughts from the IAB as far as what, overall thrust of the privacy sandbox and where it's going to land, do you think?
Yeah, so I'm looking for my stat. In the state of data report, we have, it says, hold on one second. Although 80% of data, and our advertising executives, I'll say ad executives, are aware of privacy sandbox. Less than 60% are using or planning it to use this year.
Wow.
So that's quite interesting. And then when it comes to Apple iOS, they're not increasing their spend in 2024 on iOS. So this is where it goes to the CTVs.
I was going to say, yeah, that part doesn't surprise me. The first part surprises me, that like companies are 60% planning to use, because think about the amount of spend that was going to Google before. Like you said, where's that going to go? It'll be reallocated to CTV, I think, to retail media networks or commerce networks. I think there's going to be different places, for them to allocate that spend, which begs the question of why they're doing that, which then leads us into, I think a big thrust of this is around measurement. They need to be able to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns. And that's where I'm it's like reading the tea leaves as far as what form of measurement are we moving into? Is it, like we talked about, kind of pre-call, a type of MMM, incrementality, just overall net.
I think it's moving towards MMM. I think and there's going to be different approaches to media mix modeling. I don't think there's a one size fits all or a universal approach. Again, I think companies are going to need to experiment. It's a time for innovation. It's a time for rethink. I think we're so stuck in the whole deterministic world, right?
Yeah.
The cold cookie world, getting real-time data, being able to make decisions on the fly. Back in the day, you didn't get a TV report until 6 months later, right?
Remember those days? I remember that. Yeah, you're right.
Right? I think my question more is, I think the industry will, in the long term, work itself out. We will come up with methodologies that each company will decide on how they want to approach it. My job, or our job at the IAB, is to help provide some level, right, baseline level of education, guidance, and rethink their approaches. So which is why we did the state of data, really wanting to help companies understand like where they might fit in when it comes to these changes, where they might need to do some actions. We are working on what I'll call a cookbook, or potentially some sort of cookbook, to help companies. If you're going to do retargeting, here is some alternatives or some ways that you can go about doing retarget, or something like retargeting. But I think that measurement in itself is where companies are going to really have to experiment on their own and come up with their own models. My concern are the mid tail and the long tails on both across the entire supply chain. And because there's a lot of money in our study that says that people are investing a lot of money, like I said, in software, in products and services, but also talent, retraining their own staff. That is a lot of money. And I don't think that Apple, Google, legislators are taking that into consideration, and the impact that this is going to have economically to the global the global landscape.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Right. And I think we need to figure out ways where I tout, or I pride myself, or we pride ourselves at IAB, that we can help possibly facilitate this, but it's not just us, right? We rely on our members, we rely on tech companies and agencies to test out these things, provide feedback, share that knowledge. And a lot of companies keep it to themselves. Oh, I figured out a way around it. But let's try and help each other out, is where I'd like to see us do.
Yeah. I think there's two parts there that I've noticed, because I work at, my own consulting identity business, which is really curated around bespoke solutions for specific, usually buy-side marketers, and they come to me and they say, we need to retrain some of our marketing team to understand this new post-cookie world and how it's going to work, or we need to hire. Can you help us write a job rec? Because they don't even know what to even put, and it's tricky because we don't even we know, but we don't know. So, I think it's talent is a really something that is not talked about enough as far as having the right talent in place to make sure that there's an understanding of how to use all these new tools, to do incrementality testing across the IDs, the tools, the cohorts, and then try to find out, from a performance standpoint, how things are doing. And another thing that as we touched on measurement, but we should also touch on, up until now, we've, last click analysis, conversion, looking at the kind of the new set of attention metrics and where we're looking at, what constitutes a conversion or what constitutes,
An outcome.
I think that's interesting that we could touch on for our marketers who are on the call that are wondering, I really just focus on whether conversion might be getting an email address, conversion might be a new customer, conversion might be any number of things, but there's going to be a whole new world of, gathering, attention metrics and adding to your first party file.
Well, interestingly, so we have an attention task force that I lead, and we have identified that there are really multiple approaches to measuring attention. There's what I'll call the biometric, and I'll combine bio and neuro kind of together, but it's basically people hooked up, or there's some sort of device that is monitoring or tracking if you're present in the room, if your eyes is on screen, your blood pressure, your brain waves, the gamma waves, heart rate, all of that stuff, right? Then you have your traditional data signal, proxy signals. And those are the ones that we often currently use to measure viewability, engagement, and such. And then you have your cognitive, your also traditional A/B testing, surveys, panels, focus groups. And what we're seeing is that there is no one solution that really is scalable and accurate. There are great methodologies. Each of them have their role when it comes to measuring attention. But there is a lot of debate on what attention means. I don't think we'll actually get to a definition of what attention means. There's too much like scientific, academia, scholarly papers that are done that is beyond what the IAB is capable of doing, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a PhD degree in any of this stuff, right? I'm just your old traditional digital media gal.
Same here.
And I think attention metrics will have just the same, at least especially device signals, the data processing will have just as much challenges because it's requiring on data signals coming through the devices, which is what Chrome, Apple, and legislation is trying to do. When it comes to eye tracking, neuro, biometric, and panel data and focus groups, those are obviously all consented. People say they have to fill out a form,
They had to consent for that.
application, they got to get hooked up, so they know that they're being monitored. Outcomes, I think, will remain the same. People will still, whatever their goal is whatever their goal is. It's just the approach of what is important to them and the key factors that they want to consider what is attention. There's a role that the creative has versus the environment and as well as the device. And so we talk about it at user related, ad related, and environment related.
Yeah, that's a great summation. Yeah, user environment and looking at those three categories. I think I'm going to pivot a little bit because I think, in the essence of time, I want to cover, there's I want to call it new because it's not new, but, DMPs are kind of, I won't say sunsetted, but they've, third-party data is kind of having its going away a bit, but a lot of companies are really saying we're going to outsource, a lot of this, personalization, targeting to CDPs in the CDP space. And I think that that's an interesting space right now, and we're going to find out, where that's going to go in next year. But I'd love the IABs and your opinion on, the CDP space is pretty crowded right now, and I think it's being road tested by a lot of companies who are looking to find out the promises were really big. Are they working? And, not to name names, but like some of the players that we think, will live through third-party deprecation and be able to, continue to provide personalization, provide levels of measurement within their own, CDP walls, and then have their own CDP IDs that can be, quote unquote, as they like to say, competitive with some of the bigger IDs out there. So I'd love your thoughts on what the IAB is thinking about when they look at the CDP space.
Well, first off, can we stop using the term personalization? There is no, like, right now, as we speak, there is no ad personalization. When we talk about personalized ads, that does not exist. What we do in this industry is provide relevant ads and it's almost at a cohort level. It's not like, I know it's Angelina. I mean, the
It's like
capabilities
deterministic. Yeah, we don't know it's that person. Yeah. Exactly.
You don't have a significant amount of data that you can completely personalize. But what you do have is maybe 3, 4, 5 signals, the max, that you're using to deliver a relevant ad to that user, depending on their geo, a page that they visited. Perhaps it could be based on demo, it could be on interest, right? But I think we overuse the word or abuse the word personalized, that when legislators, when lobbyists hear the term personalized ads, this is what creeps them out. So we need to stop using the word personalized.
It implies PII. It implies we know that person and we're personalizing to them. But what I've seen, and I think it's unfortunate for the marketers that are or the brands on the receiving end of this, is they're vetting CDPs, putting out RFIs, and finding out, they're upper 6 figures a year, even 7 figures a year for a CDP, on the promise of personalization based on a time to value window that is anywhere from 90 days to 6 months to get enough data back where they feel like they can personalize at an individual level. But like you said, it's not, I wouldn't say possible, probably inaccurate, because so many emails are shared between households and devices. And then beyond that, when the measurement comes back in later, it's going to be all over the board. So I feel like that, I hope the CDP space can, like you said, not use personalization as a term because of privacy concerns, because of what they're doing is relevant ads, not personalized ads. But there's
and to Slava's point, the capabilities are there.
I'm
just saying it's just not it's not practice.
It is. You're right. It's not practice, but
it's not practice.
That's what I worry about as far as, and we can, so relevant ads is one thing. That's sort of a segue. Speaking of relevant ads, is as we look more towards, it's AI, as everybody's calling it now, but it feels like you and I have been in this industry forever. Before it was machine learning, it was just ML, and now we're moving into more advanced AI modeling to provide more relevant ads to, whether it be, like you said, probabilistic. Is it a household, an individual, whether it's part of a cohort? But I think that, the AI tools that are coming up and coming through, I think they're going to be beyond like relevant ads. I think a lot of AI is going to sit in that middleware too, of helping to, normalize first party data, helping to take unstructured data and put it into the right schemas and things like that. So I think AI is going to have a role that's going to hopefully streamline a lot of the logistical work for getting ready for this kind of new world, beyond just the generative AI stuff that's making the headlines. So
I do want to go back to your question about my thoughts on where the CDP market's going.
Please. Oh yeah, please.
Okay. This again, my personal opinion, not statistically based, but just based on what my experience over the years. I think you're going to see agencies who have significant first-party people-based data, they're going to, they're either going to acquire or build, most likely acquire, because building is really hard, acquire CDPs into their fold. Currently, right, a lot of the CDPs sit on the brand side, but I think economy of scale is being able to leverage their, let's just take Dentsu as a good example because I worked at Merkle, right?
Yeah.
No, I have no clue if Merkle's doing this. So this is all speculation on what I would recommend, is that agencies provide some sort of capability for clients to tap into a CDP capability that the agencies can leverage, just like they're doing and partnering with the identity solution. So really honing in on building out the pipes between a CDP, their CRM database, and an identity graph or identity resolution. I also see tech companies doing the same thing. So I wouldn't be surprised Trade Desk or will go that route, because at the end of the day, we need to ensure that there is clear consent that is articulated or transmitted through the supply chain and track that appropriately. So rather than paying a tech company to do this, people are going to want to be able to have a bit more control into the product roadmap of those. So that's my thoughts.
Hey, Andrew, I totally agree with you. I think there are going to be a lot of bolted CDPs into acquisitions, into tech stacks, and I think that's going to be kind of the future of the way it's going. I know we're coming up on time, but would be remiss if we didn't talk about LiveRamp's acquisition of Habu, the state of clean rooms, how brands are looking at clean rooms. Like, in the beginning, it was kind of like, let's obviously create second party data, relevant ads, relevant data, commingling, like data. Also, I found it to be a place where brands could say, we're going to put our data there. It's kind of an insurance policy that no matter what happens in the clean room, it's going to be privacy compliant, hopefully. But I think that, I'd love to get your thoughts and IAB's thoughts on future of clean rooms, the Habu LiveRamp merger, and where we see marketers using clean rooms going forward, because there's a lot of value in second party data, and we'll find out how that'll be road tested, like you said, from a probabilistic standpoint as we go into next year.
Yeah, so I think I think data clean rooms will become the centralized reporting platform to enable media mix modeling and multi-touch attribution. It's also going to be a great planning tool to do scenario planning or predictive analysis. That's where I think you'll see the strength. As more restrictions on first-party data continues, there's going to be the inability to match those audiences. So the things that brands and publishers can do is draw insights from their own first-party data.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think and then the ability to possibly democratize some of that data, or bring in additional data sources into it to enable those creations of cohorts, lookalike models, and then working with publishers and saying, okay, based on my set of data, it appears that women who drink soda 2 times a day, who have 3 kids, are the type of cohort that we want. Can you create that same type of segment or cohort on your end? So there might not be a full first-party data connection and the match rates, but the ability to draw insights and have them, this is the parameters that I want. Let's see what you can do on your side, and how scalable that is.
Yeah. Well, I think I could talk about this for another 2 hours, but unfortunately we're out of time. So this has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot.
Thank you for listening to the MarTech.org podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at martech.org/newsletters.